Alright, so now we're on chapter 22, which is covering Southwest Asia, and section 1 is about the Arabian Peninsula. Now, this is the area that is home to Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. And the main theme for this section is Islam. We're going to be learning a lot about the religion of Islam. Now, Islam is one of the main religions in the world. It's one of the top 5. And it is one of the newer ones. And there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of prejudices and stereotypes about people of this faith. So we need to make sure that we understand the basics of it before we make these judgments, and so that we understand things better. So Islam began in Saudi Arabia in the 600s. Now, it is a monotheistic religion, which means that they have one God. They are one of 3 religions in the world that have one God. That would be Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, their God is named Allah. Allah is the same God as the God of the Jews and the Christians. But they don't believe in Jesus, and they recognize him as a good person, but their prophet is named Muhammad. So Muhammad and Allah are the 2 names associated with Islam. Now, their holiest city on earth is the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia. We're going to learn a little bit more, and we'll look at some pictures of Mecca. So they're a monotheistic religion, which means they have one God. It's the same God as the Christians and the Jews, and his name is Allah, and their prophet is Muhammad. Now, Islam has 5 basic beliefs called the pillars of Islam. Now, Christians and Jews have many beliefs also, and the main Jewish beliefs would be the 10 Commandments. Now, the Islamic people believe in a lot of those, but they really focus on these 5 main pillars. The first one is faith, or declaring that there's only one God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of him. The second one is prayer. Now, they pray 5 times a day, formally. Now, in some countries which have theocracies, it is mandatory, and the whole entire city stops, prays, and they all do it together at the exact same time. So 5 times a day. They might do it at a mosque, or if they're out shopping, they roll down the rug and pray right when they're shopping. The third one is giving to charity, or alms. Now, they must give 2.5% of their income to charity to help out poor people. This is very similar to the Christians also, who are asked to give a tenth or a tithe of their income to charity. The fourth one is fasting during the month of Ramadan. Now, Ramadan is their holy month. It lasts about 40 days, and it's a lunar month, so it moves throughout the year, but right now I think it's kind of in the fall or early winter time. And during the daylight hours, they fast. Some women and children, are allowed to eat, but adults fast during the day, and then when the sun goes down, then they're allowed to eat. Then they kind of stay up and they read the Quran. And at the end of the month, there's a big celebration. And it really gets them to focus on their religion. It's not that different from Christians taking time to celebrate during the Lent season, because a lot of Christians give up something for Lent. It might be meat on Fridays or chocolate or ice cream, but for Muslims, they take a whole entire month where they don't eat during the day, so they just focus more on the religion. And the last pillar, number 5, is the Hajj, or pilgrimage, to Mecca. Now, it's a journey to all the holy sites in Mecca, especially the Kaaba. And we'll look at some pictures on the next page of that. The Kaaba is that meteorite. It's been dedicated to Allah, and it's the major thing that all Muslims should go to if they can. All right, so let's quickly review these 5 pillars of Islam. Faith is declaring that you are believe in God, and it's just Allah and Muhammad. Prayer 5 times a day facing Mecca. So let's look at Mecca. This is Mecca. All right, so this is Mecca. This black rock right in the middle here is the Kaaba. Now, the Kaaba is a big black meteorite underneath this, and Mecca is the home of this. It's a city in Saudi Arabia. Here's another better picture of an aerial view. Now, this is during the Hajj. So everybody all year 5 times a day, prayers facing Mecca. And then during the Hajj, or this pilgrimage to Mecca, everybody comes here and they wear these white outfits and they walk around this Kaaba 5 times. They circle it 5 times and they're just praying and singing. And it becomes this big festival of pilgrimage. Around here in Saudi Arabia, you can see that there's a lot of hotels and restaurants, and it really does become this huge event for people. All of these white specks here are people, and you can see them walking around the Kaaba. This is a big deal, and every Muslim is expected to go there if they can financially. And, you know, if you live a lifetime, I mean, you have a lot of time to save up money. Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali have both been there. Now, all of these things, the 5 pillars, they're in your book on page 504, and there will be an essay question on these. You're just going to have to be able to explain, you know, what are the 5 basic pillars of Islam. There are 2 types of Islam. Just as there are many types of Christianity, there's 2 types of Islam. You know, I mean, if you just think about how many different types of Christianity there are in rural Minnesota, where we live, there's Catholics and there's Lutherans, which are the main 2. And then you also have Presbyterians and Baptists and Methodists and all different kinds of different groups of Christians. And throughout history, they have not got along. I mean, most of England's history is war between the Catholics and the Anglicans. It's been pretty brutal, but we live in America, which is a fairly tolerant society, so we don't really think about that very much. However, with Islam, you know, it's a religion that's 600 years newer, and we see a lot of this right now, and there is warring between the 2 types. So let's look at those 2 types. Now, the 2 types are Sunnis and Shiites. Now, what is the difference? All right, they differed over who should lead the religion after the death of their leader or their caliph. C-A-L-I-P-H, their caliph. You know, could their leader be anybody who is educated and knew a lot about it, or should it be somebody who was related to Muhammad? Well, they split. Sunnis said it should be anybody who's qualified. Sorry, I'm writing with my mouse. Who's qualified, and Shiites believe that it should be a relative. Sorry, you can't really read that, but they thought it should be a relative. So, who should be caliph? Well, that was the big issue. Now, so what is a caliph? A caliph, I guess, for Christians, the best frame of reference you would have is a pope. You know, somebody who kind of oversees the church and the people and the religion and the direction they're going. And they had this huge disagreement about it. And this fight was probably 1,500 years ago. So it's been a long time. Now, one country in the world specifically is Shiite, and that would be Iran. Iran is the largest Shiite country. They used to be a country called Persia, so any people that are Persian or speak Farsi, which could be in Afghanistan or parts of Iraq, will be this. Now, Sunni is everybody else, or the majority of people. The majority of Muslims are definitely Sunnis. So again, these are the people who thought that you could have just any qualified male as caliph, just someone who's educated, who knows about the church, and relative of Ali, who was Muhammad's son-in-law. And this division is responsible for a lot of the things that we have going on in the world right now. If you think about how we are in Iraq, you know, Saddam Hussein is gone, but the war is not over. No, well, because you have Sunnis and Shiites arguing against each other. We have different ideas on how the world should be run, different ideas on everything, and of course they're warring. It's not that different from the Christians who were fighting other Christians in England and Ireland and a lot of Europe throughout time. Our country was founded by Puritans who were escaping England because of the religious persecution, and they were all Christians. So it's not that different. Now, another thing in this chapter, section 1, is the theocratic government. Now, that is quite different from what we have. The United States has a democratic government, and we are secular, or separate of church and state. Our secular laws are different from everything else. Your religious laws are not your secular laws. You don't have to be a Christian to live in America. You don't have to be baptized. If you want to live with somebody before you're married, a lot of religious people are not going to agree with that, but the government's not going to throw you in jail for moving in with somebody. However, in a theocratic government system, your religious laws are the same as your government laws. So religious laws are your civil laws. That's why in Saudi Arabia women aren't allowed to drive. Women must be separate from men. If there's any thought that somebody has been committing adultery on somebody else, they can get thrown in jail or killed in some countries. So whenever your religious law is your civic law, you have a theocratic government. We don't have that. We have this, where it is completely separate between church and state. So this is what we have. Now, Iran is an example of a theocratic government. Saudi Arabia is also. Now, if you flip in your book to page 505 and kind of follow along with me, it goes through the different colonial powers that have taken over this area of the world. Towards the end of the 1600s, leaders in the Muslim nations were weak. At the same time, countries like Britain and France were pretty much taking over the world. Think about America was colonized by Great Britain and France also. And they wanted it, but they were controlled at first by the Ottoman Turks, right here, who were Muslims, and they controlled the area out of Turkey. But then after World War I, the Ottoman Empire lost, and that became Turkey. So Turkey formed, and they lost their territories. So then Great Britain and France divided up that land and took it over, because that's kind of what they did back then. This is when they started taking over things like the Suez Canal and having a say in the region. And this is also when they discovered oil. The Europeans were very interested in oil, and they kind of did the research, and they found how to get it out of the soil, and that's really when it became a big deal. It wasn't until like the 1930s when it became a big deal. Now, most people in the Saudi Arabian area, in the Arabian Peninsula, it's all desert, so most of them were nomadic people. Well, now they're moving into big cities, and that lifestyle is a lot different. We watched that video on Jeddah, and it was pretty modern. And if you look at some of these things and some of the videos that I post on the Moodle site, you're going to see that they are pretty modern. But please make sure that you're reading the rest of section 1. Now, religious duties do shape their life. They're praying 5 times a day. And in a society where it's announced over the loudspeaker that everybody's going to stop what they're doing to pray, that's a big deal, and it really does dictate how they live. It controls their day. Now, some Christians pray 5 times a day, when they get up in the morning with breakfast, lunch, dinner, and right before they go to bed. But it's not over the loudspeaker and mandatory for everybody. So their religion in the Muslim world, especially in the Middle East, is a huge part of their life. And not being Muslim kind of makes you stick out like a sore thumb. And some countries are okay with that, some are not. And that's when we get some of the persecution issues. But make sure that you read all of section 1. It ends on page 507, and we will catch up with another section. Thanks.